PR Newswire is definitely, because that's where all the big announcements come through. And then usually you have your contact information on there as well. So that's another great asset for us.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Media Coffee, a podcast by Cision and PR Newswire. I'm your host, Sami Saad, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Melissa Bill, a journalist with over 16 plus years of experience and the current host of the Business RoundUp. So we're going to be discussing Melissa's career as a news reporter, her editorial process, and then her perspective on the current state of the media. Hi, Melissa. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for joining. We're happy to have you here. So let's get started with a little bit about your background. Can you share why did you get into news reporting? I think it was back in 2005, right?
Yes, it's been a little while. And I actually came kind of a roundabout way. I was in TV. I was doing more like acting and commercials and like TV hosting for more entertainment type stuff. And then I just got the bug. I was like, I think I want to go back and get my bachelor's degree. So I went to Florida International University and went for broadcast journalism, mass communications, and graduated. And then I did my internship at Local 10, which is a big Miami news station. And went from there. I followed behind Michael Putney for politics, did a little stint in sports, traffic. And so I really kind of got a feel for a little bit of everything. And then it's like people don't really tell you, but when you get into news, you got to start at the bottom and you work your way up, and so you have to be usually like a news writer, learn how to write for the morning news or the evening news. And after that, I finally landed a position as a reporter in Pennsylvania. And that's kind of how I got my actual like news reporting start.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think you've mentioned that you covered a lot of stories as a local reporter, which is very, typical when you're working for like a local station. You kind of get stories from all over, the place and to cover them. What was your main beat, after that? I know that you're covering business and, want to talk about a little bit about that?
Sure. So most of my career was more focused in, I guess, probably just like general news, but then probably but I also did work in like business as far as like helping them with like marketing, public relations. So I had a pretty good foundation in the business world itself. So I kind of made the transition into more business like reporting probably about 2 years ago. I was asked to head up the Texas Insider, which is part of the Epic Times, had a more localized publication that they were starting to create in Texas. And they needed someone to start doing some reporting. So I started doing some news reporting, and we focused on the finance market, financial district, tech, a little bit of everything. And then politics even, when they had the elections going on. And that's when I really kind of started really getting into like more of the business news. And then they decided after about 8 months, they were going to discontinue the show. And that's when I decided to take it on myself with another person, my production person. And we decided to just do business. We're like, we want to focus on business, entrepreneurs, startups, everybody, people just making, news in the industries and stuff like that. And that's when the Business RoundUp kind of came to be.
That's great. And so let's talk about your editorial process right now. How do you find your next story, your next, podcast guest? Do you want to share a little bit about your, process of how you mine for stories?
Yes, definitely. So, I mean, platforms like Cision and a lot of these different platforms that's a really great source for us because it is difficult to get, we need connection to the public relations people and the business people and the leaders. And as a news reporter, I mean, you can only spend so much time like looking for that. So they need to have a way to reach us. And a lot of times, if you're not at a news station where like a podcast like mine, there has to be a place where they can find that information. So those are platforms that's where I do receive a lot of, the media kind of press releases and pitches that I get from these different PR agencies. I start to kind of build a rapport with them. And then usually, hopefully, we have like a good relationship because, they always have different clients and different people coming, on board. And they just pitch me, and I kind of see if that's something that fits what we're like looking to cover that, week or that month. And that's kind of how I find my stories. And sometimes I will also reach out. Like I see somebody and I'm like, this is a great story. I really want to cover it. Our team will reach out directly too.
That's a great point. I just want to mention that you're a publishing partner for PR Newswire, and it's just want to emphasize how one of the benefits of being a publishing partner, which is having that access to the content and the news content. A lot of it is like announcement, studies, and research and breaking news really. So it's a lot of there's a lot of ways that you could benefit from having that access to the content, especially in your editorial process. So I think it's great that you kind of mentioned that and mentioned how press releases play a role in your editorial process. I was going to ask you about that in my next question. When you look at a press release, what do you look for, or what kind of press releases kind of pique your interest the most?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up too, because I forgot to mention that PR Newswire is definitely, because that's where all the big announcements come through. And then usually you have your contact information on there as well. So that's another great, great asset for us. And when it comes to like press releases or pitches, really, it's like what you see first is usually the subject line. It's the title, it's the top of it. So something that is like fairly to the point, that it gets whatever the meat of the subject is really needs to kind of be emphasized in the beginning, because that's usually what they're going to kind of look for, if we know what the topic is about. And then the first paragraph needs to tell us, why we should care, if it's timely and what it's about. So that's kind of like, and then from there, we're like, okay, I like this. This is something, that is engaging, that I think my listeners would, like, and then we usually read further.
And I'm sure you receive a lot of emails from publicists and public relations professionals. Um, do you read them? Do you kind of like use them to help your editorial process to write the next story? Um, and what do you look for the most in those public relations pitches if you receive them?
Yeah, I mean, so the different pitches for sure. I mean, a lot of times, sometimes if it's good enough, like I've had pitches or a press release that I could use it for my questions. I could use it for the actual interview. Some people have, I know media outlets have even published, using a press release or the information in it, because it's got enough, it's got quotes, it's got everything you need. So yeah, they're definitely. And you can get ideas from different pitches as well, like what's going on, important in the news cycle.
And is there anything you want to share about what you want to cover in the future? What's coming down the pipeline? Anything that you want to let PR professionals know? For example, what your next story is, or are you looking for any specific experts? There's things like that, just so that our PR professional listeners can kind of reach you with the most fitting story, or with the something that fits your editorial.
Yes, I mean, so definitely everything that's going on with, supply chain, the tariffs right now is a big thing. So how people are, helping to diversify with supply chain and meet those demands. Finance is always a big one. You have a lot of different things happening with the crypto and Bitcoin market. Where is that going to go with regulation? How are people going to kind of frame that in the future? And then also just business operations, leadership. I think we like to cover different, because there's different facets of business that I think are really important to highlight.
Very interesting. And you mentioned something about the crypto industry, and that's kind of like going to tie into my next question, which is what how has the business media landscape changed throughout your career? Because there's the reason why I mentioned crypto, because like it dominated the news, right, a few years ago, especially the business finance news. Do you still see that? Do you still see like crypto being a big conversation and in the media. And then after that, we do want to like share your perspective on what has changed in the overall landscape.
Sure. So I think Bitcoin, I think crypto and Bitcoin and those, it's still like digital currency is still going to be kind of like making news. And I think they're trying to, right now, they're trying to figure out how to make it regulated, but not to the point where it's, it's too regulated. And so they're trying to kind of work those. I think we're going to see that process continue over time. But I think we're also seeing diversification in different like finance, like as far as insurance being used, like life insurance being used as like an investment vehicle, and all these different other types of. I ran into somebody else and I never really thought about it. You have the storage facilities. They've always been around, but they're starting to become. It used to be like the mom and pop, like storage unit on the corner. Now they're becoming like really technologically advanced, and they're actually becoming a very good investment option for people. So I think it's going to be interesting because the more we see, I think just AI and the digitalization of different things, it's going to open it up to a lot more possibilities. I think that's what's going to happen. Even in media, AI it's made things easier. You also have to watch that it's, people don't just, you still have to be the one guiding it. You don't want to just, I think that's going to be an important thing too, is that how we kind of use technology to help shape the future in these different industries, and not allow it to just take over and it just does everything. Like we still have to kind of guide, those things.
Interesting point. And you mentioned AI, which is what's dominating the news cycle now. Do you receive a lot of like AI pitches? Are you interested in covering that industry?
Yes, I mean, I've actually covered quite a few different parts of AI. One that was really interesting that I thought was pretty cool is now you have where it's oh my gosh, there's a word for it and I can't think of it. Basically where AI, they can clone people. So you have actors, you have models, and this type of thing, and it can actually make a clone of that person, and it might put him somewhere else in a different photo shoot in different clothes, but without their permission. So there's companies that are coming up with ways to kind of copyright your face, your body, your likeness, and give these people like some kind of control over like actors and models and that type of thing. So that's kind of interesting because you have AI kind of not doing bad things, but going in a bad direction, but then you have people trying to create a framework to help protect people and stuff like that. So I do think that's pretty interesting to kind of hear like how we're there are people who are kind of stepping up to see how we can make it better and kind of protect in different ways.
And I saw some of that in the recent Super Bowl commercials. So where a lot of actors have, I guess, licensed out their looks, and it's very interesting to see. And I feel like we're just at the beginning. There's so much more there. Um, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Do you have any advice you want to share with journalists in your field? Any current journalists or future like up and coming journalists?
Well, I'll share one just for like journalists in general, like that are coming into the field. I think it was good for me to sample a little bit of different things, like doing your internship and like, kind of testing out politics, testing out sports, testing out general assignment, and then maybe in then business and finance. So you might find something that really clicks with you. That's like your passion. And I think that's good to kind of determine that. And then also, I think it's good to, as a journalist, to read a lot yourself and to stay on top of like what's going on, in news wise. And you should be, I try to learn from every single guest. So if I didn't know anything about that particular topic, I try to read and learn more about that topic and then take it. And it's kind of fascinating because you learn things every day. And that's the fun part about, I think, the job, especially in business. You learn from all these people. Like some of these people are have been in like, CEO in these top companies for like 25 years, from the startups, and what they're going through. So I think that, that's what I would say is definitely just try to soak in as much as you can. And yeah, and, and learn more about what you're covering, whatever that is, your beat.
Agree. That's a great advice. And do you want to share just a brief description about your podcast and what it's about? You did touch on it a little bit in the beginning of this interview, but just kind of like why should people listen to it?
Okay, sure. So it's the Business Roundup, and we cover everything from business leaders, operations, innovators. It could be industry trends, and it ranges from finance, technology. It could be just business operations, supply chain, and we just really focus in. I like to really get into like why that person got into that industry, what did they do to to become successful in that industry, how are they building that company, what are some of the key things that have strategies that have helped them be successful and are helping them to push this company forward. And so anybody who's looking for things like that and challenges, anybody who wants to kind of hear from these different people, it's a great place to kind of get inspired and find out more about that industry. And yeah, I think that's what we try to do.
Thank you so much for sharing. Just wanted to follow up quickly. After you do the podcast, do you kind of repurpose any of that material? Do you write a blog post, an article about it? You want to share a little bit about like what kind of content do you also post, around the podcast?
Sure. So we usually do an audio only podcast first, and then we'll do that and we'll go to iHeart, Apple, and Spotify. And then we make YouTube and like social media shorts for Instagram, TikTok. So we do short clips from that, and then we do a full YouTube video that we post to our YouTube channel. And then from there, what we're trying to do, which I'm hoping to get started this year more, is take those and transcripts and different things and make it into a Q&A interview, and also start having the guests start to contribute and do some Q&As and stuff like that, and share with us big announcements that we can kind of get out there. So we want to start really not only having podcasts, but becoming more of a media site where we have stories and articles for people as well. So that's our goal for this year.
That's great for thought leadership. So really appreciate you doing that, and it's good to know, good for our audience to know that you can, do so much with, one piece of content. You could, repurpose it. You could share it and help, your website to have like consistent, fresh content, and which is always great for your platform. So what's the best way for PR professionals, for example, have guests that want to appear on your podcast, or any other purpose for like writing an article? What is the best way for PR professionals to reach you?
So probably the best way, well, it could be LinkedIn. I'm under Melissa Bell. We also have the Business Roundup, on LinkedIn as well. My email is mbmedia24.7@gmail.com. They can reach me there. And also we have our website, which is called the Business Roundup Show. You can send us an email there as well. And yeah, and we'll definitely get back to you. We're also on Instagram. I mean, there's a lot of different ways, Instagram and YouTube.
I appreciate you joining Melissa, our podcast, and sharing your thoughts and perspective and a little bit about your background and the Business Roundup. Please make sure to check that out. Thank you so much, Melissa, and yeah, have a great day. Really appreciate you. Appreciate having you on.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.